And then they do this whole joke about Deep Impact.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
and he's like,
they came out in the same year.
They came out, but he's like, wrong movie. Those were two different movies, but they came out like the same summer. Yeah. Welcome. You are entering into a strange dimension. A dimension where narratives from across space and time come together. Narratives that could have, might have, or should have been all exist here in one space. This is CineCasters Ultimate Timeline. Welcome back to CineCasters. This is the show where we watch terrible, sometimes great, but usually terrible movies, and then we pitch them back to one another in ways that would make them 100 times better. My name is Janglez the Strange, or Andrew, and I'm joined by my good friend, Nate Draper.
Hello. Hi. 100 times better. Wow.
Yeah. Oh, man. In the case of last week with Now You See Me, I think I've been hitting it out of the park lately.
No, you have been doing exceptional.
I think I've been knocking it out of the park.
A good solid pat on the back.
I'll give myself one right now. Ooh, that feels good.
There you go.
No, I just think that...
Pat that back.
That particularly last week...
Sorry.
Pat that back. I just think particularly last week with Now You See Me, my pitch was way better. And it's hard to, like as I said last week, it's hard to explain exactly what I mean just through words, because I think that movie I wanted it to be very visual, because I think the movie we got, Now You See Me, was fairly visually stunning. Like, we're trying to make the magic look really good, but, all form and no substance.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
100 times better. 100 times better.
Just... Yeah.
100 times better.
Listen to last week's episode. You can hear us talk about it in all the depth that we did.
Yeah, we usually go for about an hour, so you can have an hour of that. This week, instead, we are talking about the 1998 DreamWorks movie Ants.
Ants.
And what did you think about... With a Z.
Or a Z?
Ants.
Or a Z. I don't know.
I would say Z because we're Canadian.
Yeah, that's true. See, that's what I think. But if you actually he's not like Z in terms of the character Z or Z-E-E. It's just
his name is Z.
The letter Z.
Z.
But he's Z because they're American.
Yeah, I don't understand if there was supposed to be a joke in that. Like, his name is Z, and so Ants with a Z is the name of the movie. I
don't know.
Don't think that was intentional. I just think it was supposed to be like, oh, you know what's cute? Z's to replace S's. That's what all the kids
Maybe
are doing.
Maybe it's because it's like the first letter is the first letter of the alphabet, and then the last letter is the last letter of the alphabet.
Well, I thought they were going to do more with that too, because they have a character named Z, and then they have another character named Azteca, and I was wondering if they're supposed to be like an A to Z kind of thing. I don't know. What I do think is... well, why don't we get into goods and bads? Go ahead and start with your goods and bads. Yeah. Or maybe just what you thought of the movie.
Yeah, so I'm not going to lie. I actually think the animation... Sorry, animators of movie. I don't think your animation was great.
Yeah, they do look a little wooden.
And I don't just mean the look of it. I just mean the actual... just the way they moved. The movements felt blocky. Like, I felt like I was looking at a video game animatic for 90 minutes. I mean, I get it was the 90s and they were still trying to figure it out, but you had around the same time Toy Story and Bug's Life, which actually in terms of animation quality was much more fluid and it looked much more believable.
I think I do think that part of the reason for that is like this early or late 90s lean into trying to do everything 3D.
Yeah. I mean, this would have been DreamWorks trying to get in on that, I think. Yeah. Was this their first step into doing that? Into
3D? I'm assuming so, because Prince of Egypt came up before this, and it's way better.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm assuming
way better. I don't see anything. I'm just doing a quick scan of Wikipedia. Oh, here we go. Ants was, according to Wikipedia, there it is at the end of the first paragraph, Ants was the first film and project from DreamWorks Animation.
Well, that's crazy. The Prince of Egypt came out the same year, 1998.
And the second... Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it's just crazy because the Prince of Egypt is a classic 2D, but it's a magical piece of work, both music, like that. The Prince of Egypt to me is like top notch artistry.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think like just visually and like the music is amazing.
Amazing.
The music is incredible.
What do you think of the music in this movie, Ants?
I actually thought it was interesting. Like, I thought, to be honest, I didn't really pay that much attention to it, but there were some moments where I was like, oh, that's a cool piece of music.
I found it pretty forgettable.
Oh, okay.
There was a couple parts where I was like, oh, they're trying to do like the ants go marching thing. That was clever. And there was a couple, they were trying to do like this whole like, oh, it's insects on large scale. And so they always do like the flight of the bumblebee kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even notice that. So there was one part where it got kind of like dark and I went, oh, that's interesting. I wasn't expecting that. But to be honest, yeah, I mean, I wasn't afterwards, because with most of the movies, I'll admit, most of the movies, as I'm writing my pitch, I'll listen to the soundtrack for that movie.
Oh, that's
with the majority of them, because most of the movies we've done actually have really good music.
Pretty good soundtracks, yeah.
We had a stint of Thomas Newman movies there for a while.
And Thomas Newman he's really good. Even if the movies that get made are not great, Thomas Newman is just tops.
Oh, yeah. No, his music is amazing. But here, it's Harry Gregson Williams and John Powell, who are both, in my opinion, fantastic composers, but who knows? Anyway, this also premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival.
Well,
I didn't know that. This is
not
a TIFF movie.
We would have been 6.
I would have been 6, yeah.
Yeah.
I was also 6 when this came out.
Yeah, so I don't know. I gotta say, like, in terms of goods and bads, I don't have a lot of good things to say about this movie. The biggest thing that I have going for this movie is its biggest strength is how short it is. It's only 90 minutes. And I gotta say, like, I'm kind of glad it was only 90 minutes because I was like, I kind of don't care about any of this. It jumps all over the place a little bit.
It basically, yeah, it really meanders. Like, and I'll get into that in a minute when I get into the things that didn't work. But the one thing that I thought did work, there was a reference to Marx that I thought was funny.
Oh, like the labor?
The workers control the means of production.
Yes.
Is one of the, like, and I was like, oh, that's clever. Because the whole collectivism versus individualism thing, you go, oh, okay, that's sort of, there's tie in there.
They do talk about, like, when Bala and Z are together, he's like, oh, you've never done any labor. And she's like, what do you know about labor? And I was like, like, you're so close. Like, this could be good.
Yeah, exactly. I like the scene where there's the bugs getting high around the campfire, and they're like, what if we're just like smaller things in a bigger universe? That is a funny moment. The other moment that I thought was genuinely hilarious was when the guy's like, how do I look? And it's just his head. It's like, your body, I'll find it. It's here somewhere. I did laugh.
That's Danny Glover.
And yes, yeah. And then the opening with the therapist. I thought that was an interesting way to open the movie. Yeah,
I did find that kind of funny.
Other than that, that's kind of it for the things that I thought worked for it.
Yeah. I did think that was funny, like the inherent jokes where he's like, I never really knew my mom. And
yeah, like, exactly.
I'm the middle child. And I was like, oh, these are all throwaway jokes that are really clever.
Mm-hmm, yeah, exactly. Like, as an opening, it promised a lot more than what it delivered, I think.
Yeah. I really did not like Z as a character.
That's fair. He's kind of annoying.
He's got. I don't know what happened. Like in the 90s and early 2000s, we had this whole thing where like, oh, I'm the annoying guy and I'm the main character and oh no, and you're just like, I don't know anyone who actually talks like that. It's a caricature.
Well, that's Woody Allen. Like, that's basically Woody Allen. Or at least, the caricature of Woody Allen.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just like this overly neurotic, like, I don't know. Stop it. Don't do that.
If you see him in any of his movies, that's the character he plays.
So he just is a one note.
Well, I think they also picked him because it all takes place in New York, and Woody Allen movies are very New York.
Okay.
So it's like, it's Woody Allen. This is with a Woody Allen voice. I
didn't get that, and I can't say that I really like got anything out of that.
It's a bit of a stretch. It doesn't really add to the story. It's just a funny little throwaway thing, like, oh, haha. It's Woody Allen I did think the like. When they do, like, he grew up in a city and we can see the outline of New York. Mm-hmm. And then the lights come on and it's blades of grass made to look like buildings. Which part?
At the very beginning. About? At the very beginning, when like it first comes in, and he's like, "I was born, and this is what I talk like, and this is what the movie's gonna be about." And then all of a sudden, it switches from New York to Blades of Grass.
Yes,
I was like, "Oh, that's funny. That's clever."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in the end, it actually like fades up from Central Park into the skyline again.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, "Oh, that's good parallelism. It's decent, well enough." Yeah. I don't know. So anything? What was it that didn't work for you? Everything. I really didn't like this movie. I think I actually didn't. No. I shouldn't say that. So last week, when we watched Now You See Me, I'm sorry, I'm doing a comparison again. You should definitely go watch that one. Now, last week when we did Now You See Me, I found myself being like, "Oh, this is a train wreck," and I can't look away. So there's like, there's a certain amount of like, "Oh, I can't wait to see how they're gonna fuck this up," because it's just all expectation until you hit the twist. But this movie, I've seen it before, but I didn't. I don't remember it. I didn't remember it watching it, and now I know why.
Same with me.
I feel like this movie is so bland. It's not bad, but it's not really good. It's not memorable because it doesn't have anything terribly bad or good about it.
Okay.
I will say that I did think that they made a concerted effort to make sure that every ant looked different. And I think that was great. Like every ant looks unique. All the characters we meet look different, and they do have like fun personalities, like you want in a kids movie. I did think like the magnifying glass scene where they're like frying the ants. Right. I was like, that's some UFO shit, and I think that's super accurate. Like, you know what I mean? That's definitely how we view UFOs. Is exactly how they view
exactly
glass. Like, and I was like, oh, that's really fun.
Yeah. That was a funny moment. That was a moment where I genuinely laughed.
Yeah. To me, I was like, oh shit, you could have done a whole movie about UFOs and ants.
Yeah.
And then have the reveal be like that it's magnifying glasses and be like, oh shit.
Right, exactly. Or you as the audience know it's a magnifying glass.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really all I have to say. I hate Z as a character. I think Bala is far more interesting, but as a waste. Like, they don't do anything with her. I hate that they get together at the end because it's like, but why?
Yeah, exactly.
There's so much product placement in the garbage trash at Insectopia, like in the picnic.
Yeah.
The only part of the movie that I liked actually was Danny Glover.
Oh, yeah.
Who they promptly kill off.
He's there for 5 minutes and then is gone again.
It's like, great, good. My favorite character.
Yeah.
They
can't say that I... Amazing... Sorry?
I can't say that I enjoyed this movie.
I mean, you're not alone there. I think I picked out some things that I think were specifically where the problems were. Like we talked about, it meanders quite a lot. Like it goes all over the place in terms of, it starts off with one thing and then it just kind of, what it has to deal with to me is the sequence of events in terms of him getting what he wants just doesn't track in a way that to me is logical or even makes any sense or has any consistency to it. So at the beginning, it's implied that, okay, it's about someone who's dissatisfied with their life and they don't want to be who they are. But then it's suddenly about him trying to impress this princess. And so they've created this whole weird dynamic. But then it's
also not about that. Like, he's dissatisfied, right? Because I don't even know what Z wants as a character. He's dissatisfied with what he's doing. Right? And so I was like, okay, there's some interesting things here. Then he meets Bala, and then his entire focus becomes her. And then he goes to Insectopia, and then with her, but he doesn't want to be with her anymore because she's a whiny bitch. Which is fine. No offense. But like, and then they make their way back for some reason to like save all the ants. I don't know. I'm so unclear. Like, why did they need to go back? Oh, because she gets kidnapped again. But then the guy who kidnaps her is like, did we really need to do this in the first place? And is like, dude, buddy, you couldn't have second guessed yourself like 10 minutes ago when they were in the park. Like, you could have just stayed with them in Insectopia. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It just.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, everyone loves a good redemption, and I like that Cutter, Christopher Walken's character, had a redemption. But it's like, I don't know. I don't care.
And you know what? They had another great opportunity for a joke in there, and it's probably good that they didn't do it. But they're like, they're like, oh, how are you getting there? Are you flying? He'd be like, no, I'm walking.
Oh, of course they wouldn't have done
that. Sorry, I couldn't help it. I felt the bad guy character was one dimensional, and specifically his reason for.
He's the same bad guy.
His reason from
any villain. It's like
yeah. Well, that's the thing. Is like his whole reason for trying to undermine the queen. It was non-existent. There was no real. Yeah, there was no reason for him to do what he did, or to have any motivation for it.
And he's just a generic villain. He's just literally every villain from every animated movie. Yeah,
exactly. And I also found the princess character to be very inconsistent as well. So like at the beginning, you get the impression, okay, she wants to spend time with Z, and then now suddenly has the opportunity for adventure and she doesn't want it.
Yeah.
So like and now they've changed it so that they have to have some conflict between her and him and make it awkward. And then she changes her mind and goes with him
But then she slowly learns to love him for some reason.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I mean. It just doesn't. There's a logic to the.
There's no connection between the two of them either.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway,
this movie was a mess.
Yeah, that's kind of it. Yeah, it really just goes all over the place. So I think to fix it, the solution is you pick one character, you give them one goal, and you stick with that.
See, I on my pitch did something a little different.
Oh, okay.
For my pitch, had two characters with the same goal.
Oh, now that's interesting.
But with two different stories.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I actually think I might have knocked it out of the park again.
Should I go first then?
Yeah, you should go first.
Mine is
I think
okay.
I got a good one.
Okay, so I'll go first then. You sound pretty confident about yours. So mine is basically 1984, but with ants.
Oh, okay. Mine is very similar.
Oh, that's so funny. Okay, well, it's so funny because I know we have pretty similar sensibilities, and there have been some times where I've written a pitch and I've gone, I feel like Andrew probably came up with the same thing, and was pleasantly surprised to find you did something different. That was also very cool.
I'm super glad, actually, just conceptually, that we don't talk about our pitches beforehand at all.
Yeah, same with me.
Because otherwise, I think we might influence each other.
I think so too. Yeah.
Because I think we tend to pick up on the same ideas, but we do almost always focus on different themes.
Yeah, exactly. We do, and even if we do pick similar themes, we do find different ways to go about exploring it, which I always find interesting.
Me too.
Because we end up with two pitches that are really interesting, I think, and
sometimes we even wind up with pitches that are compatible, where we've been like you'll have pitched something and I'll be like, oh, that's a good idea, I'm going to put that into my pitch.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, so in this case, mine's basically 1984 with ants. More or less the same story, sort of. So it's the same opening in that he's talking to the therapist. Also talks about feeling neglected by his mother. But in my version, it's not like you're a soldier or you're a worker. They have actually different occupations, and then their world resembles our world a little bit more closely. Mm-hmm. So in my version, he's a bureaucrat, and his job is to sign forms. He just goes to work and he signs forms, and that's all he does. At the end of a workday, he's at the bar. There's a drunk guy who tells him about Insectopia, and then there's some guys that come in and say oh, you've had a little much, and they take him away. And he describes there are these massive anthills that reach all the way up to the sky, and he describes basically skyscrapers, but using how an ant would perceive a skyscraper, I suppose. Anyway. One day, Z, he's still called Z in mine. Fuck it, let's call him Zed. His name's Zed. Anyway, Zed discovers that the forms that he's signing are actually... I don't know what it is that happens, but he discovers that the forms he's signing are actually approvals to have rogue ants executed.
Oh, damn.
And so he starts feeling like, oh wait, I'm complicit. I mean, I've always believed that I'm supposed to be doing this for the good of everybody else, but and I just went along with it. I didn't ask questions, but now I'm realizing that I'm complicit in this system where people are dying. In my version, it's maybe not Woody Allen, but someone who's also sort of neurotic and paranoid, maybe. Not to that same degree.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he's at that same bar one evening, and he ends up befriending Weaver, who's the Sylvester Stallone character in the original.
Yep.
Who's a former soldier who had his leg bitten off in a battle with another ant colony, and so now he's being discharged, and he just works as an advisor. So one day Zed's at the bar, and he's talking to Weaver, like they become really close, and he opens up. He's like, "Hey, look, I discovered. I'm filling out these forms, and people are dying, and I feel like I'm complicit in this system, and I don't get it." And,
oh my god, you need to play Zed. This is the best thing I've ever seen.
Oh,
like I'm watching you be like the character, and I'm like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Oh, thanks. Okay, well, I'll keep going with that then. Anyway. So he's telling him this story, and Weaver invites him, like says, "Hey, I feel the same way. Everything's bullshit, but there's some of us who are going to do something about it." And so he basically finds himself in this group of. The joke was going to be they're underground ants. Har har. Anyway, they're all questioning society, and we're like, yeah, the problem with society is we've all been lied to, and we've got to change the system. And they have their own like version of Karl Marx that they quote about like the rights of the workers, and they just take it and put it in ant language.
Yeah.
Anyway, meanwhile, like on the surface, the General Mandible character, he's talking about like how he's trying to maintain order and preserve the status quo because they have to be ready. Like he's actually getting them all ready because there's another ant colony they're at war with that they've been told is like this very barbaric race of ants that's going to come in and kill them and eat them all, and it's going to be horrible if they let these ants get close. Speaking of which, I actually did watch today. I watched like a BBC clip. I don't know which series it was from, but it was a clip from a BBC show where they showed ant colonies at war. It is horrifying.
Yeah,
it's terrifying. Like it is brutal. So
they like rip each other's legs and abdomens off.
Oh yeah, it's terrifying. Anyway, so. Anyway, it continues to follow Zed, and then there's like all this. There's a whole propaganda thing going on where they're like, we're going off to war and we're trying to recruit people for war, and Zed also starts thinking that he's being followed. So it plays a little bit like it plays off some of those old film noir tropes where it's like the character thinks they're being followed and they get paranoid. But this is a character who is actually like paranoid,
it's supposed to be played up paranoid. Yeah.
See, that
exactly. Makes sense to me now. Is like if you're going to play up on that, then having a paranoid character makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm. So I went with that, but it's now taken like it's a 1984, and like, oh yeah, he is being watched, so he has every justification to be paranoid. But it's also like how much of it is him overreacting to things as well. Anyway,
you got to do it in
one of these meetings. Sorry?
You got to do it in character for me.
Oh yeah, sure. I was just walking home, and there was this guy, and he was like wearing a coat, and I couldn't see his face, but I swear he was looking at me, and my antennas were just like they were going crazy, and I felt like they were on fire. Like my antennas were on fire, and I just had to go, and I had to like drip them in water, but then I started getting sweaty, and I don't know, I just gotta take a breath.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
It's amazing. So good. Anyway, sorry.
Thanks, man. Anyway, he goes to one of these meetings and he finds the plan. The underground ants are planning to blow up a production line. They're like, we're gonna sabotage this production line. And Zed gets picked because he's inside the bureaucracy and he has access to something. I don't know what that is, but he's able to somehow, because he's on the inside, to help them out. But he starts asking like, yeah, so you want to blow up a production line, but why? And they're like, well, we have to disrupt the system. Yeah, but you're just going to blow something up? Like, you're just going to make chaos? Like, no. We're blowing this up because we have to, we have to challenge the system. Yeah, but then what? You blow some stuff up and then what? Where do you go from there? Anyway, he's now having second thoughts about the whole thing. And now he's getting paranoid that both the government and the people who are the rogue ants are both after him because they know about his plan and the government knows about his plan. And there's a scene where he basically meets with Weaver, who's the Sylvester Stallone character, who's become his friend at this point. And he's like, why do I have two crummy options? One wants to ensure the perpetuation of some banal status quo, and the other just wants to blow it all up. They don't have any plans or anything. They're anarchists of the worst variety. And so he's telling Weaver about all of this, and he gets to the point where he gets so scared that he just decides to make a break for it. But he's not able to. And he's apprehended and he's taken to prison. And it's revealed that the anarchists that he was with were actually created by the government to recruit people. So, and Weaver is actually a government agent who basically, they were like, oh, this guy is dangerous. So they lure him in. And then they create this whole thing like, he was a rogue ant. So that if anybody asks questions, they say, oh no, he was plotting this thing, and they say this whole thing. It's like, no, but I'm innocent. That wasn't my idea. I even said it was a bad idea. I didn't like that idea. And so they're going to have him executed. But just before they're able to carry out the execution, the enemy colony attacks, and everything is destroyed. And Zed is carried off as a prisoner of war, and he's taken to the other ant colony. And he's been led to believe that these are like, they're barbarians, these ants. And he gets to the ant colony, and they're about to execute him, and they go, hey, wait, you know how to sign papers. He's, yeah, sign papers. And they're like, oh, we actually just had a position open up in our bureaucracy. Could you fill the position? And so he ends up working in the bureaucracy, doing the exact same thing in this other ant colony. And actually, after living here, he's like, oh, these ants aren't barbarians. They're actually like, they're just the same as these are the exact same ants as the colony where I came from. But here he's got benefits. He's got a dental plan, and things. His life has actually gotten better since this new ant colony took over, and he starts and he's actually quite happy with where he is. But over time, he starts. There's a younger ant that comes to him at one point and is like talking about all the issues in society. It's like there's all these problems, but Zed is he's like, oh, it's way better for me, and he's so oblivious. Yeah. To like, or he's like, I don't know, is this real?
Or even I think you could even play that where it's like this younger ant where he could even say now like hey, it might be bad, but it could be worse.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, go on. Yeah,
exactly. So anyway, but he's from his point of view, he's like, oh, this is way better. Like I don't have any issue with it. However, one day he discovers that the forms he's signing are also for the execution of ants. And he finds one day that the form that he signed was the young ant that just talked to him the other day in the bar. So now he's really paranoid. Anyway, so he goes to his therapist, and he's like, and so he's talking to his therapist.
He's got a new therapist at the colony. Yeah.
He's got a new therapist at a new ant colony, and he's like, maybe it's because I was just neglected by my mother that I need like approval from some other system. and she's like, oh, you mean like you're the queen ant from the other one? You're just trying to approve this queen ant. He's like, yeah, I guess it's just this, I guess like the system. I just want, I just want someone to affirm, like some affirmation of some kind. Anyway, he's just going crazy, and he's had enough. So he just decides one day he's going to make a break for it, and this time he escapes, and then he gets squished by a pedestrian, and then it ends.
Oh my god, that's so dark. Whoa. Just minding your own business, finally make it out and you get squished. Damn, man, This is not a kid's movie.
No, it's not a kid's movie.
It's okay. Mine's not a kid's movie either. So,
anyway, there you go.
I think it would be interesting if you had a comedic scene in there at the beginning where somebody asks him like, where he's like, oh, Zed, what do you do? And he's like, I sign forms. That's what I do. I sign forms. Oh, okay, yeah, but like, what are the forms? What do you mean? I signed the forms. I'm there to sign the forms. The forms need signing, so I signed the forms. And that's what like leads him to like ask questions. Or like, yeah, Zed, but like the forms, or maybe it's Sylvester Stallone's character, like, yeah, Zed, maybe you signed the forms, but don't you think those forms are probably for something? Well, I mean, I guess I never really thought about it. I guess they could be for something. I mean, they probably are for something. I just always thought that the forms came in, they needed someone to sign them. I was the guy they needed to sign them. They got my signature in, so I signed them.
That was great.
Yeah, that's a fun. I can see why it's a fun character to play. You just have to make a reason for it.
Yeah, exactly.
He's that paranoid. But yeah, I love it. I just think that's really, really dark. It is 1984. Mine has a lot of 1984 elements too, because I just think when you're talking about Marxism and capitalism or totalitarian governments, you're automatically going to have 1984-esque, Orwellian, Kafkaesian,
yeah, exactly. Surveillance states, all of that. Yeah,
exactly. V for Vendetta is basically just 1984, but Frank Miller.
Yeah. No, it's not Frank Miller. It's,
Alan Moore. Sorry, Alan Moore.
Alan Moore. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. The other one who did the same thing.
The other guy. Time.
Yeah. And The Watchmen has a lot of like 1984 in it too. That surveillance state.
Yeah. So. Or the movie Brazil, which I talked about with one of my last pitches, is basically 1984.
Yeah.
There's like a more surreal.
You talked about that one in the Adjustment Bureau.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Mine has a lot of the same things, but I actually wanted to focus on two characters, so I have two main characters. So, are you ready?
Yeah, and please do impersonations.
Oh yeah. I don't know. My character wasn't supposed to be as neurotic as yours. So anyway, so inside of the ant colony, we meet the ant who we're now calling Zed. Who he begins his day with the new. It's much more like you said. The society is much more like our society. It's less like ants and more like humans, but it's still inside the colony, so we can make jokes like that. I'm thinking much more like the Bee movie, where it's like the hive is much more representative.
I know, because I thought about that too with this, because that Bee movie did a similar thing where it's like they have
it's much more like mine is very similar. So inside the ant colony, we meet Zed, who begins his day with the news. And the news about the ants is basically everyone's part of the colony, and they're reminded that a colony is like the family, and they all work together so they can provide for each other, and that's how the colony remains strong. So the news is repeated, like this kind of news propaganda is repeated by a lot of the businesses and workers that Zed passes along his way to work. He meets up with two of the other diggers. His two best friends are Weaver and Azteca. And we see posters all along of a beautiful, benevolent-looking ant who is the queen, and it says, like, the queen for the queen, colony for the queen, stuff like that, slogans everywhere, as they make their way towards the tunnel they're working on. So the news broadcast we saw earlier was given by one of the higher-ups named General Mandible. He's part of a group that run the colony with the queen as their leader. The general has a meeting with all of the leaders of the colony, the heads of the colony, and they decide that there's a looming threat of another army that needs to be destroyed in order to keep the colony safe. So the others all agree, but in order to do so, they need the approval of the queen. So the general and his right-hand man go to see the queen, but instead of a benevolent, beautiful ant that's on the posters, we see like a regular ant who's just giving birth constantly, just like we saw in the movie. It's just like a woman who's just like, yeah. Sure, if you think that's the right thing to do, you can go to war with this. That seems like a right thing to do to me. I leave it up to you, General. Meanwhile, she's just like constantly pooping out them babies. So here we also meet Princess Bala, who's destined to become the next queen and is betrothed to the general for some reason. The queen signs off on the general on the general's war and begins conscription. So he now has the right to conscript ants. So Bala then decides she wants to experience the outside world before she knows that she'll have to become the next queen. And so she decides to go dancing with some of her friends. Zed gets word that he has been drafted by that conscription we saw earlier. So now he's going to the army, but his friends don't have to. He was one of the people who was conscripted. So So they go to a bar to celebrate. They're like, we'll go to a bar before you have to go into service tomorrow. So there Z is a bit of a downer, but he's intrigued after hearing an old-timer talk about a place called Insectopia and all its glory, where people are free and have all this stuff, and that he's been there. He's seen it. And Bala overhears this too, and then the man is sort of escorted out, rather surreptitiously. They sort of bond over the fact that Bala and Zed bond over this place. Could this place really exist where people are free and can do whatever they want? She says they should go look for it, but Zed's like, I can't leave because I was conscripted. You know what I mean? I can't. And so she's like, oh God, I'm so sorry. He's like, maybe we can meet when I come back. You know what I mean? Like, and she's like, I'd really like that. So the next day, Zed shows up for service, and we see him being, they're all preparing for war, which is mostly more propaganda about being loyal to the colony, colony for the queen, and how to ignore the enemy's lies and keep your mind sharp and straight. Then they march to war and wind up battling another group of insects. A lot of them are ants. There's a lot of ants, but that they're fighting. In the battle, like it's terrible, and Zed gets separated from his platoon and is injured. And he is mistaken by the enemies as one of their own and is taken back with them so they can patch him up.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Meanwhile, back in the colony, Bala is told by the general that her mother is reaching retirement age and it's time to start thinking about taking over as queen. So she must produce children in order to keep the colony running. Bala is like, no, I don't really actually want to do that at all. I'm repulsed by the idea of only giving birth. Like, I thought the queen had more power than that. I thought, all I would do is give birth. And the general tells her, like, if you won't do it, we can always find another person to be queen. Like, you're replaceable. You're not special. And in fact, the last couple of queens have all been hand-selected by the general and the leaders of the colony.
Oh, interesting.
So the queen is actually just a figurehead for the people to believe in.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah.
Disgusted by this, Bala attempts to flee, but is captured by the secret ant police and taken somewhere else. Then we flick back to Zed, who wakes up in the enemy colony that they were fighting and finds out that the enemy colony is actually Insectopia.
Ah.
And he sees that the lies the colony told him, he slowly sees the lies that the colony told him are in fact not lies. That's all true, and it was the colony that was lying. Insectopia is a place that's not just free ants, but insects of all kind live there, and allows people to choose their own jobs, and it's a pretty great place from what Zed can tell. Back to Bala, on the other hand, she's taken to a secret colony base where she is tortured, and basically she's told, you're going to disappear. But she meets a colony official who tells her that she knows that she is the former princess, and that she can help her escape. And so with that person's help, that ant's help, they manage to get free, but this official that helped her get free is captured, and we never see her again. Back to Zed. Zed begins to explore Insectopia, which espouses freedom for all insects. And now that he's healed, he realizes, he can begin working. So he decides he wants to try something new and gets a job as a food scout, going through the trash and finding big piles of food that they can bring back to the main city, Insectopia. And he gets paid to do it. I've decided they get paid in food crumbs.
Okay, nice.
So he gets paid to do it, and he can spend the food crumbs on whatever he wants. And so he's like, yo, this is dope. Back in the colony, Bala meets with her mother. After escaping, she secretly gets in with her mother and tells her that, her mother basically was like, the reason you were selected out of all these healthy babies is because you have a good ability to give birth. That's the same reason I was chosen. All of the queens were chosen because of how great how good we would be at being prospective mothers, queens. Bala is disgusted by her mother's own internalization of the rhetoric and lack of control on her own body for the quote-unquote good of the colony. So she sneaks away and contacts the same broadcast station that we saw at the beginning and convinces them to send, come with me and I'll show you I'll show you what the queen really looks like. I'll show you, we can break down the system. Back to Zed. Zed is enjoying his life, but he sees that Insectopia seems to be, it's not as great as he originally thought. He can see that there are bees that seem to have an easier time. They don't necessarily run things, but they have an easier time. Like, everyone's good to the bees. And the ants do okay, but people, the other insects treat the mosquitoes terribly. Like, they're always being pooped on or whatever. So one day Zed's like, I'm gonna take a break from working today, and I'm gonna go use some of the crumbs that I've made to help out this family of mosquitoes that he like sort of knows, and he feels good about doing the right thing, and the family is like, wow, thank you so much. So the next day he returns to work only to find that somebody else has taken his job, and he goes to his boss and is like, hey, what the heck? Like, well, you didn't show up for work yesterday, so I replaced you. And he's like, I'll do your impression. But I wanted to help these people, so I thought I could, I thought I could take the day off. I thought I could use some of the crumbs that I made here at this job, so I could help them. They were down on the luck. They didn't have a job, so I was like, I could help them. And you guys are all about freedom. Freedom is the best thing. So I chose my freedom. I chose to help them with my freedom. But now you're telling me I don't have a job anymore? And the guy's like,
there's been a shortage of blood. They don't have any blood. They need something else to eat on. So I had some crumbs, and I thought, you don't have any blood, so here you go, have some crumbs.
I'm leaning heavily away from like the insect tropes.
So okay. Yeah. This is a good idea. Yeah.
Just because I think otherwise you're gonna wind up with problems if you're like, well, mosquitoes drink blood, not crumbs. It's like, yeah, I know that, but go away. I'm leaning on the fact that people find mosquitoes annoying. So his boss is a bee and tells him he's like, but this is the freest place in the world. You can do whatever you want. So like, don't say that this place isn't free. And Zed's like, okay, but what I want is my job back. That's what I want. I want to be free, but I want my job back. I only took a day off to help other people. I want my job back. And his boss is like, no, we already hired someone. We don't need anyone else. So you can go get another job somewhere else. And sort of Zed is sort of like, but I thought this place was free. I thought we could do what we wanted. And so he winds up looking for another job, but he realizes the only things he knows how to do are basically dig. And so he winds up getting a job working as a digger again. And so he's like just as dissatisfied. He's just as dissatisfied. The only things he's done are being a soldier and digging, and he doesn't want to be a soldier anymore because that was terrible. So he's like, I guess I'm stuck digging because I have to pay my rent. I need to buy food, so I need a job. So he winds up being a digger again, and he's back where he started. Back to Bala. Bala leads the camera crew to where the queen is, but before they can get there, she's captured by the general because the media crew, the camera crew, that's the whole broadcast company is owned by the leaders of the colony. It's all a branch of the colony. The media is controlled by the colony, so they knew she was coming. So she tries to struggle, and actually a couple of the crew are like, holy fuck, like this is real. Like they see what's happening, and they start to like fight and film as well. But this time Bala is captured again, but they did manage to film some of what was going on and what the queen actually looks like. But they're all captured. Zed decides that, back to Zed, he decides Insectopia is not really all it's cracked up to be. He basically is like, they claim to have freedom, but like there's just a different kind of like way of keeping people in their place. And so he decides that he's going to go back to the colony and meet up with Bala, who he had like this kind of connection with, and tell her like, even though Insectopia is not, or even though the colony is not that great, Insectopia is not that great either, but at least they had some kind of connection. So he's like, I miss her. I did say, I think I'm going to go back. So he arrives back at the colony and starts asking questions about Bala, the princess, and he gets no answers. He gets the feeling like everyone knows that she was the princess. Like he'll be like, Princess Bala, and they'll all be like, there's no princess named Bala. Like, never was.
Interesting.
And he's like, he gets the feeling everyone knows, but nobody wants to say anything. One of the media members that was at the filming puts a tape in Zed's hand and tells him to watch it. So Zed watches, and he sees all the shit that happened, and when Bala was captured for the second time, he sees the queen too, and he's like, oh shit, like this is just as messed up as Insectopia. Like Insectopia had all these like sort of internal problems. This one's just as messed up. And so Zed goes to Weaver and Azteca, his friends from the beginning of the movie, for help, and Weaver's like, yeah, we got to do something, but Azteca says no. She's like, no, I'm not going to report you, but I'm not helping out with this. I'm just going to keep my head down. So Weaver and Zed find and save Bala from being executed, and as they reappear in the midst of the colony, there's like a chase scene, and they're getting out. They see a broadcast, and it's Azteca saying she changed her mind. She's going to do the right thing, and so she plays the broadcast, and we see what happened with the queen, and the whole colony sort of falls apart. And we see that the whole way the colony was designed as an institution was a lie. And then Zed and Bala make their way there and explain what they've seen. And Zed's like, the whole war is phony, and that, we shouldn't, just because this is crappy, we also shouldn't go to Insectopia because it has its own perils. So they sort of talk it all out, and then they agree. They're like, we need to make a better system of organization for the colony, and we don't know what that will look like, but we know we want it to be like better than Insectopia and better than the colony, and so that's where we end.
Nice.
Yeah.
Ah, good work.
Yeah, I really wanted to like look. I mean, the colony is obviously like Soviet Russia with the KGB ants, right? And then what I wanted Insectopia to be like the West, the U.S. in particularly the U.S., and show like late capitalism, like how it's like they espouse freedom, but like of course there's not real freedom. Like
sort of like a neoliberalist,
yeah,
post 80s America.
Yeah, basically like how, it's the freest place in the world. You can do whatever you want, but at the end of the day, you need food. And there's like it's the same kind of classism that he was seeing in the colony, with like the colony leaders leading these like rich, opulent lives. He was seeing like the bees seem to have like a easier time getting jobs or doing things, or are more educated, whereas the ants and the mosquitoes and all different kinds of insects, they all live together and that's great, but like there are issues. Like I kind of wanted to really lean heavily on like the reason communism doesn't work as a structure, or or what people claim is communism, which is actually just becomes totalitarianism in like Russia, North Korea, and lots of different other totalitarian regimes. But also show like capitalism, especially late capitalism, is also not great through a Marxist lens. But also, keep it kind of children friendly.
I like that. Yeah. That was a nice way to blend it together. I like also how you managed to figure out getting him to Insectopia through this. He gets conscripted to go to fight, and then ends up getting mistaken as someone on the other side, and gets to go to Insectopia. But then also, I also quite like it in movies when they get to the Utopia and realize it's not everything they thought it was.
Yeah.
Which I think you did.
I also think it works well because like the conscription into the army shows like there is this kind of like this regime, like we need to go to war, we need to protect the colony, and it's like, but then it turns out that that's just a manufactured war based on propaganda. Like Insectopia is the enemy, we need to crush them, but we don't find out that's Insectopia until he gets there. But also I wanted to show like when the ants see him injured, it's not like they're not like, oh, he's an enemy that we can help. It's literally they're just like, oh, we can they don't recognize that he's not from there. You know what I mean? That there's no way to recognize. They're all ants.
Right.
And I kind of wanted that to be like, yeah, we're all human. Right? So at the end of the day, we, regardless of our ideologies, we owe each other the courtesy of or decency of being human to each other, being humane to each other.
Yeah, exactly.
And also just Marxist critique on capitalism and totalitarianism.
Or on
both, because the colony claims to be what I would assume is like the ant version of communism, but it's not. There's clearly a hierarchy, right? And like even the queen would probably say like I wanted to do with Bala was kind of like a feminist critique on Marxism, like a feminist.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting way to go too. Yeah,
like they always say like, what is it? The line, take back or control the means of labor or whatever.
Control the means of production?
Control the means of production. I think that's what it is. Or take back the means of production. But like from a feminist standpoint, that's like, take back or, take your body the means of reproduction. Right? So like we have this sort of feminist take. Because the queen has no... And I definitely wanted to show like the queen lives really, really well, but like her only use is to continue procreating for the colony.
And her decisions are made by somebody else. Yeah, for her.
Much the way that we would see in a lot of totalitarian regimes. Not to say that, there isn't feminism everywhere, but just to say like, when we have these kinds of governments or leadership roles, they are often they're often harder on women in different ways. You know, labor isn't always physical, much like you had with your Zed in the bureaucracy. Labor isn't always physical, but on women in particular, I do think it is sometimes a reduction to reproduction. Mm-hmm. You are as useful as you can in order to produce more soldiers, in order to produce more vehicles for propaganda, for labor. And that's a different kind of labor in itself. You know, when you seize the means of production, that's what it is. When you seize or take back or seize the means of reproduction, I think is a very feminist way to look at that. And I also wanted to make sure that we had two characters, one to explore this sort of feminist Marxism that would stay in the colony and explore like the secret police and whatnot, and one who would leave and sort of explore Insectopia and the goods of capitalism, but also the inherent dangers of capitalism. You know, Insectopia is capitalism is great and it's done a lot of great stuff for us, but it's not the best. You know, a lot of people fall through the cracks. Hence the mosquitoes.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, reducing racism down to bees, ants, and mosquitoes is a gross simplification. But to serve the purpose for a kids movie, I mean, Zootopia does the same thing, where you're like, this is a gross kind of oversimplification, and it gets a little. That's why I was like, I want to lean away from like the fact that the mosquitoes are mosquitoes, and sort of humanize them a bit more, like, because mosquitoes do drink blood. Actually, it's only the females who drink blood.
Really?
Yeah, they need a blood meal before
that.
They need a blood meal before they can produce their eggs or lay their eggs to help the eggs hatch. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I think I think you want to lean away from that, and I do understand that there are perils in that kind of thing. But I do think like there's a good story to be told there.
Yeah. Well, I think you found the points from the movie that I don't. It's always so hard to say because it feels like because there's that one line where they actually reference Marx in the movie, so you think someone whoever was there writing it had this in mind. You found a way to flesh it out a little bit more and actually interweave it with the characters, so it fits a little. It's streamlined more.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm weirded out by this movie because I do really think there was some kind of inception, some spark to talk about like the means of labor, or even just like, you know, dissatisfaction, if we want to get Marxian about it, to talk about alienation. Right? Marx often talks about how like when you do labor that you are disconnected from, like you don't get to have the satisfaction of seeing the fruits of your labor, of seeing
right.
You know, when you build a canoe with your hands, you have a canoe, like a beautiful piece of wood that you made with your hands. But when you're part of like a larger system, particularly on like labor lines, what you wind up with is this disassociation. Like you're doing the same thing day in and day out. You know what I mean? You're just building one part of a car or digging nonstop, and you're disassociated. You're alienated from the work that you're doing, and you're alienated by the system of capitalism. But in this case, that can also happen in totalitarianism.
Yeah.
Yay, Marx.
Yay.
Not a huge fan of like communism as a government system, because I don't think it works. Because I think it does automatically break down into, you know, totalitarianism, or you wind up back in capitalism. But I do think that
often, in history at least, the examples that we've seen of it have gone towards totalitarianism
or fascism. Yeah. Or and if you want to get your own particular branch, like Maoism.
Well, fascism is basically totalitarianism.
Yeah. So we wind up with fascism and totalitarianism when people try to do communism, or Maoism, which is just a different brand of totalitarianism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. So I'm for I like to use Marxism and particularly Das Kapital by Marx as like a lens with which to critique any form of government and commerce.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think that when Because you did mention it, there's often this, it depends how you define communism. Oftentimes when people think of, because Marx had a different understanding of what communism was than how it's being necessarily implemented in that totalitarian, the Maoist, for example, it takes influence from it, but it becomes something different.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, Marx would even say any form of communism or brand or flavor of communism that has been implemented has been called communism, and it's been a far cry from what communism actually is. I think what Marx imagined was a far more kind of pastoral communism. In what I mean is, like, when communities were small, you looked out for one another. When you only had 100 people, communism works well in that system, or at least a form of communism. But I think as long as you have people with different abilities, like, true communism can't occur, because I think that all people have equity, all people have like the same value, but to say that you and I are good at the same things and can accomplish the same things would be a fallacy, right? You and I are different people, and we have different skill sets and different educations, and those are things to value for sure. But, like, say if we were doing some filmmaking, right? If we were going to shoot another commercial, as we have in the past, if we were going to shoot another commercial, we would have an inherent power structure between us because more. Right?
I see, right.
There's nothing wrong with that, but as soon as you try to be like, let's not have a power structure at all, it becomes problematic. You can't not have a power structure. It's inherent. You're always going to have one person with more power over the other. I think a better thing to do would be a bit more Foucault about it. Michel Foucault, who would say, okay, we have power structures. Let's be aware of them and how they affect how we're building relationships, how we're creating knowledge, how we're creating art. You know what I mean? How we're creating labor. Because the more we know about these power structures, the more we make these power structures transparent, the more we can make them not lesser, but the more we can work within the bounds of being like, okay, we have a power structure here. Let's make sure there's checks and balances so there's not an abuse of power. Yeah. And that's all I have to say about that. That's my rant on Marxism and deconstructionalism.
And Foucault.
Post-structuralism. And Foucault, post-structuralism, yeah. A little French post-structuralism with our German Marxism.
There you go. It was a good way to end I think it was a good way to end our episode on ants.
Yeah. I don't know. It seems weird. It seems weird to have like an animated series that is like so like Marxist, so anti-capitalist. I guess maybe you have to be, when you're making films in the United States, I guess maybe you have to be careful about how overtly pro-Marxist you are.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I don't know, because I mean, it's not like we have the the blacklist from the McCarthy era, where anything that was deemed sympathetic to the communist cause put you on the blacklist. I mean, I'm sure there's some form of something like that exists on like a NSA server somewhere, of like, oh, these people, clicked on these web pages, we got to keep an eye on them. I'm sure that exists. It doesn't get them to the forefront the same way that McCarthyism did, let's say. But in terms of like content in movies, I'm not entirely sure, because it's interesting, because you've also got guys like Michael Moore who make movies that are overtly critical. The irony is he's overtly critical of capitalism, and yet his movies are distributed by those same companies that oftentimes he's criticizing, which to me is the wonderful irony of life in, sort of the Western post, Reagan era, where it's like, okay, they're... Sorry, go ahead.
To me, that's like the you said, the beautiful irony. That's the perfect balance, when you can have something be distributed by a company or organization while criticizing it. Yeah. Because then what it says is like, we're open as a society to the idea of being better than we are. Right? Instead of just crushing it and quashing it into a, we don't do that, we don't need that. It becomes like a, John Oliver does this all the time with his talks about he'll often go into a bit about how he doesn't like AT&T or how AT&T is terrible.
Right.
And then he'll immediately
But they
go,
own HBO.
"Got your business, Daddy! I got you!
Yeah.
Oh, I'm being a bad little baby. Where? Got your business, Daddy!" Anyway.
I'm airing my dirty diapers in public again.
Yeah. And,
Yes, I've watched
So
a
I
lot
think-
of John Oliver.
yeah, I like John Oliver too. So I think that works really, really well because then it's like, and AT&T still publishes. I mean, it's popular as fuck. But
Yeah.
AT&T still publishes it. Comcast, still as a company, they both distribute all of these overly critical pieces of media, even though they're critical of them. Because I think that's when society is great, when we can be like, hey, we've got it good, but it could be better.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so
yeah.
I wonder how much of Hollywood is really overly critical of, because in the States especially, there's still this Red Scare. I don't know why, but there's still a Red Scare. It's a holdover.
There is. Yeah. It does blow my mind, and I think part of that just comes to deal with its own understanding of its own history, and I think it's because we're still like, I mean, if you think about the history of our lifetime, I mean, we were born like pretty much right at the end of the Cold War. So
Yeah.
I think in terms of how it's being talked about, I think the 20th century was basically post-World War II turned into a battle of two ideologies. And that's often, it's a massive oversimplification, but that's how it's often talked about it. Because you see it a lot also in like the conflicts in Southeast Asia, like with Vietnam, Cambodia. It usually is talked about in terms of capitalism versus communism in many of these instances, which is a massive oversimplification, but that's how it's talked about. And I think a lot of people to this day, when they think about the Cold War and the world that we've inhabited after it, and then, the fall of the Berlin Wall, collapse of the Soviet Union, basically marks this, oh yes, capitalism won, which I think that's how a lot of us have perceived it, that's how a lot of, in terms of how it's being mythologized, let's say, that's how it's told. Yeah. That's the story that's told.
Yeah. Because I think...
Actually, if Yuval Noah Harari, in his book 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, actually, I think it was that one. Yeah, he talks about that specifically, how 20th century turned into a battle of that battle of ideologies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And interestingly, in that same book, I just wanted to have a quick reference back to our Matrix episode. He says the exact same thing that we both said about Matrix, and I felt vindicated. It was great.
Oh, really? What does he say?
He basically says the Matrix. The problem with the Matrix is because the whole book is talking about free will and like how much choice do we have as individuals.
Yeah.
Because he's very much a determinist. It was actually kind of a weird thing for me reading it because I was going. It was basically, he managed to articulate pretty much everything that I feel. He just managed to say it smarter and more articulately than I would have.
Yeah.
But then it also made me go like, wait a minute, have I just like really immersed myself in the world of these academics that I've just soaked it up?
Internalized it, yeah.
But then he's talking about the Matrix, and he talks about how the better ending for the Matrix would have been for Neo to wake up and learn that the Matrix, like the real world supposedly was just another Matrix, or was also a lie. And I went, yes!
Yeah, we both did something similar to that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, Yuval Noah Harari, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. Good book.
Nice.
Capitalism, Communism, Ants.
Where can people find you?
You can find me on Letterboxd at Draper Nate, or if you want to find my movies or anything else that I've done, go to nathanieldraper.com, but that's AEL, not IEL. So NATHANAEL.
AEL.
I know it's confusing. Blame my parents. That's how they spell my name.
Yeah. You can find my band Robot Philosopher on all the places you listen to awesome music. You can also check out our sweet new video essays called This Is a Thing, where I rant about things that I like. Like last week, for you guys now, I just released an episode on Harry Potter and the philosophy of magic. It's pretty cool. You can also check out my other podcast, Audio Mind, right here on YouTube. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.